right, hello everyone. I hear there's some debug talk going on, so feel free to finish that, but make sure you communicate it. All right, welcome to ECS 179 Gameplay Programming. You now have exercise 1 out and about. How are y'all feeling about it? Yeah? Cool. I know some people have already completed it and added mechanics. So there are some people who are very savvy here. I'm not expecting that to be the norm. I am expecting that most people may have probably gotten the stage 1 done, and maybe there's some confusion about stage 2, but you got a big chunk of it done, and then you're setting the stage for 3 and 4. That's if you started at all, because it's in the middle of a week during midterms, and then there will be the weekend. So we are going to help facilitate your work. We are going to have, at least I will have office hours on Monday. I believe Nick is planning on having office hours today, or Friday, and Monday potentially. Right, so we want to give you some time to get started. We want to give you time to talk to TAs, to talk to me. I've been trying to be fairly responsive on Discord, given the hectic week. I do my best. We also have TAs that will be responding as well, and you're doing a great job of answering each other's questions, which is excellent. It's what we want to see. So please continue that communication. Are there any questions about exercise 1? I can clear up for you now. Yes?
So for the follower, you said like the player is like 5 units within the player. So like, when I look at the distance, the boss model, I think it's like 15. So like what?
That's totally fine. 5 units was kind of arbitrary. I would just make a variable where you can control that number of units. And as long as that variable is responsive and does something reasonable, it's fine.
So it doesn't need to be 5.
Yeah, like the narrative I was going there is you kind of, like, the follower's kind of dumb and you kind of step right on him before he reacts. But maybe 5 pixels of distance is too dumb. Maybe he needs to be a little less picky, the follower. They need to be less picky on how they follow. So this is a classic place where you set a variable and you let the designer tune it, right? You make that distance based on playtesting, right? So perfectly fine to export a variable or whatever. Export a variable because it's in the follower, and the follower can have an activation distance, which is different than leash distance. They're 2 separate values. I had a couple people confused by that a little earlier. So export it, play with it. 10, 15 is good. You can just go to the sprite of the follower and see how wide it is, how wide the actual sprite is in pixels, and make that be the distance. Because we're lucky, we have done ourselves a favor, and our abstract measurement of unit in our 2D world is 1 unit per pixel. Doesn't always have to be the case. We made it that way. Yes?
You're saying it doesn't have to be the case, as in the Godot game engine supports different unit sizes?
Yeah, particularly if you use the 3D. So if you're doing like you're using the 3D core renderer and not using 2D capabilities, like you want to do things with some depth, maybe 2.5D. Maybe you want something like Octopath Traveler with the 2.5D feel, or something like Fantasian that has the diorama set piece in the background, and you want a little distance in there. You're actually moving around in a 3D plane, but with a 2D perspective. And in that case, units become fuzzy, right? All of a sudden you're dealing with perspective, which shifts the amount of per pixel unit on the screen to actual pixel values, to represent pixel values in your engine. So position does not have to be pixels. It is on the viewport. So those of you taking graphics, you'll know that there are various transformation matrices. There's a local transformation matrix, there is a world transformation matrix, there's a viewport transformation matrix, and there's several more. And all of those are bits of linear algebra, matrix-based transformations where you put in vectors, okay, values of 3, which can be either position or direction, and you do math. And then at the end of the day, what you want to do is come to a fragment, which is a pixel on the screen, and blast a color to it, right? So this idea of position and movement, you can use whatever is convenient for your game logic. But then if it's not pixels, then you just have to be aware of that. And then you have anti-aliasing artifacts to deal with. There's all sorts of interesting small cases here that game engines handle for you. Godot has really good like pixel perfect capabilities right out of the box, where Unity does not. It's fun how these things play out. All right, I digressed a bit. But that was all for the betterment of your gameplay programming experience. Okay, we got more people filtering. That's making me feel good about one of the announcements I have to make in a moment. Any more questions about exercise 1? Any GitHub problems? Any GitHub Classroom problems? I think most people got it figured out. We're in the last dregs. There's still one more person, Nick. We'll get an email soon about someone who doesn't have an email address, which means someone pilfered it, probably. So we'll have to do some sleuthing. All right. Glad exercise 1's going well. Exercise 2 is almost done. So we have that signed. I'll give it out Tuesday, but you'll have until that next Wednesday any time to do it, so you get a little bonus time. Yes?
That's the peer review or
Both.
the next exercise?
Next exercise.
Right.
So-
okay, it's overlapping. I remember.
Yep. After this week, you will have a peer review and an exercise due each week. Well, that will last 2 weeks because we have 3 exercises. Simple pipeline. Okay. Well, good. If things are not clear, feel free to shoot messages. We're happy to clarify. The recordings for Tuesday and for office hours have been posted. The recordings for the discussion section and lecture for Tuesday are on the YouTube playlist. They are also in the Google Drive folder, but the office hours are also in the Google Drive folder. I'm not putting those publicly. Those are something I guess you can try to stream through Google Drive. You know, you think like with Google's cloud service, they'd actually stream video pretty well, just like YouTube through the Google Drive, but turns out that's not the case. So I would recommend downloading those videos and then playing them. They're pretty chunky though. Hope you're free some, I guess you'll have to delete some videos or something from your laptops. I know I was running out of space. More games. Okay. We have a fun announcement for you. Well, first I'll ask you a question. How many of you are excited about taking attendance? Like, just like stoked, right? Well, I'm sorry to crush your enthusiasm, but we are abating the attendance policy. We're just not going to do it. So if any of you have any ideas what we can do with those 5 points that were assigned to it, I'm happy to hear your design solutions. Otherwise, we may just normalize or make the participation worth double. The reasoning behind this is attendance has actually been pretty good. People have been attending class. We're just going to take simple head counts. We're going to just count the number of people in the room. And if that number stays roughly above half the class, we don't need to take any action. You know, that's kind of sad to say that, oh, only half the people are missing. It's fine. But you all know the realities of our classrooms, right? People get into classes and they just don't show up. But those of you who are motivated for here, it just makes for a more positive classroom experience because you actually have elected to be here when the skin is less in the game. So bravo to you. Okay. So just to clarify, there were 10 points assigned to participation and attendance. 5 of those for attendance. Those are the 5 we are not. We are going to find some other use for. Participation is still there. All right. Yes.
I have one question about the
Please, go ahead.
unable to pull from it. Is that like an issue?
We're gonna have to see why. There's so this typically not being able to pull is an authentication issue. Like you may need to set up your SSH keys. How many of you have set up a SSH key with an SSH config file before? Okay, we could do a little tutorial on this. So that's maybe 10% of the class. And most of your like Nix life goes a lot more smoothly if you know how to use public-private key pairs through SSH. It makes it so you don't have to do any password authentication. Your authentication is now through a hidden private key and a public key. Just like email authentication techniques, but stronger. All right, okay. Nick, maybe help me remember that. How to do an SSH config small tutorial. SSH keygen, config files, etc. They may be a little more tricky on Windows. I'm curious, how many of you use Windows? Mac? Linux? Okay. I think we can support those. The Linux and the Mac are basically the same. Windows is a little more tricky. Hope you like putty. All right, so for today, well, let me give you a little narrative what's happening for this portion of class. So, for the next 2 days, we're going to get you ready for exercise 2 and how to finish off exercise 1. Exercise 2 is actually about camera controllers. So we're going to use camera controllers. We're going to help you configure them. We're going to learn about them today. We're going to go through an ontology of camera controllers, and we're going to focus on 2D camera controllers because that's the realm you can get comfortable with, and then a lot of the knowledge will transfer to 3D. 3D is more complex. It's good to start your basis with something smaller. And I know some of you, I've given this lecture in game platforms back when I taught it, and some of you have been in that class, so this may be a little repeat, but you can feel like you're just like more knowledgeable. Then we're going to, hopefully that won't take our entire time today, because I want to do a little bit more game analysis with you where we'll play a game and talk about it and discuss it. And today's game is fun. I'm feeling in a spoopy mood, right? It's getting close to Halloween. I'm getting the vibes. You can tell I'm a Halloween type of person. So I just want to maybe get a little bit of inscription going on with you. And we can just discuss it, talk about gameplay stuff. All right, we're going well here. Brought this up just in case there were any questions. So if you want to follow along with today's lecture, I recommend that you go to GitHub Classroom's Gameplay Programming, or GitHub Gameplay Programming repository. And you can go to Scrollback, the theory and practice of cameras in side scrollers by Itay Keren. This was a GDC talk, a really interesting indie game developer set of talks, someone who did a fairly comprehensive analysis and ontology of how side scrollers work in 2D games, starting from way back. Right, so this, there'll be a theme in this class. We've done a little bit of it, but the theme is we're going to look at how games are made. We're gonna see like what's happening on the screen, look at it, analyze it, and then we're going to formalize it. We're gonna make it into something you can actually create. We'll do this with the Mario Jump. We're gonna do it with game physics in general. We're gonna do it a little bit now with camera controllers. Right? Recurring theme of the class. So you'll see this. This is a Google Doc. You can check it out. I exported it for easier viewing as a web page. All right. So this, I guess, is about a decade old now. But it still holds up. Like these sort of game study style analyses tend to just explain how things work, and their findings tend to stand well over time. There may be improvements, things to add on the end of this analysis later, but this historical version of it and the reasoning behind it stand well. All right, that's pretty good, right? Can you all read text with that? Okay, we can make it even a touch bigger, but then that messes with the images, so I don't want to do that. Okay, so this is a little bit, so the author of this work was working on Mushrooms 11, an indie game, and wanted to get the camera just right. So what do you do when you want to get something just right and you're a very detail-oriented person who likes to dot all the I's and cross all the T's? You deep dive, right? You go a little nuts and you find everything with points of variation that you can find historically, and you account for it. Right? You try to make a comprehensive literature review-like view of what came before. Everyone's favorite part about writing papers for their classes is doing the comprehensive literature review around the papers, right? Well, some people, this is true. But we care about scrolling. We care about panning. So what's the basic functionality? Why are we even caring about this at all? Like, what does this give us? This is super basic. We're building fundamentals here. Why care about scrolling? Why is scrolling even a thing? The first video game didn't have scrolling. Chess doesn't have scrolling. Why do we care about scrolling? And pan.
Is it helps us create worlds that can be much larger than our screen allows.
Right? It lets us create worlds that are much larger than the screen allows, repeating so we can hear it on the camera. Did you want to add?
I was gonna say pretty much the same thing. Just like limit the person's view or the player's view based on
Right, so we're limiting perspective. We're making sure, so this is true, we want to explore a world that's larger than us. What does that mean? Well, there's this idea of exploration there, right? You're not omniscient, you don't know everything at once, right? If you look at real-time strategy games, right, they try to give you a little bit of broader view, a bird's eye view and omniscience with a mini map that's in the corner of the screen, and then you get a detailed map that you can micromanage on, which is most of the screen. And as you unlock the fog of war or have units scattered around the map, or you place wards to see who's jungling, you get information, more persistent information. And if you have, map hacks on, you have that omniscience, right? Having a camera, a scroller, just gives you a viewport of the world where there's an in, there's an out, there's a seen, there's an unseen, right? So it's pretty important. And if you look at the neural background here, motion is important to how we see things. When we'll go more in depth on this when we talk about game feel, what we're actually seeing is just like a flip book, right? We're seeing a bunch of static images on the screen, frame by frame, that our brains and our ocular and neural pathways our ocular vision system and our pathways to our brain that process that vision information will interpolate that into motion. If it goes fast enough, roughly more than 10 frames a second, your brain will interpret it as motion. We're going to actually put some real numbers on this in milliseconds for all the different reaction times later in class. So we care about eyes, we care about ears. And motion is important because if you play VR, you'll know this, that when your inner ear or your sense of place and space, your proprioception, differs from what your senses are bringing in, what happens? You get sick. You like my late lover dad who went to watch whales with me once in Santa Cruz. Dramamine. All right. So we also care about not making players sick. We care about not making players sick, but we also care about interaction, interactivity, player agency, player control. Each one of the points of configuration for your camera, for your scrolling pane, matters to how the game is perceived and how playable it is by the player, right? I know you're shocked to hear this, right? But it's good to formalize this. Attention, interaction, comfort. All of this matters. If you're lacking in any one of those in your game, it's gonna feel bad, and your reviews are gonna not be good. You're going to get player feedback that isn't meaningful to your long-term game mechanics. They're not going to get the story. They're not going to be experts at your game and help you tune that final boss fight. They're going to be like, this game's kind of unplayable. So you have to have a sense of this before you even can have something that can even be play tested in some senses. Luckily, I think a lot of you have played enough games and have done enough interactive experiences that you already have some sort of sense of how things should be. But we don't want to rely on intuition. We want to rely on some formalisms that inform our intuition and our design sense. We want to taste build and get our own sensitivities and sensibilities. All right, so there are lots of games we're going to talk about today. We're going to start more at the arcade and Atari era, because this is where cameras were very explicit. The camera logic was extremely easy to deduce. So let's start with Rally X. Okay, we can do one more. We can do this on Rally X. So this is position locking. I just said that you could easily infer it. What's happening here? Describe this camera algorithm for me. Maybe someone who hasn't talked before. Yeah, go ahead.
Follow the car.
Follow the car. Well, can you put a little finer point on that? It follows the car. How so? What's following the car?
The camera.
Okay, yeah, so the camera, the center of the screen, is pegged to the center of the car, right? When the car moves around the world, the camera follows the car. It's like it's a drone hovering directly over top the car, our camera on a pole.
So the X and Y position is the same as the car, and the Z position is like above it. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So in this case, you could see, there's a couple metaphors you could use, right? You could have a car moving around the world and your camera's following the car, or you have a car being static and you're like moving a sheet of paper under it, right? That's kind of what it gives that impression, right? So that's a little bit, this works, and a lot of your early games will probably do exactly this, right? But there's better things we can do. We'll get to them. Like Kung Fu Master. I believe Kung Fu Master was an arcade game and was later, I guess, inspired the karate set of games for the NES. And this is position locking and edge snapping. So we're a little more nuanced here. How is this different from the position locked camera that we saw in Rally X?
Once the player reaches a certain point, the camera stops and the player keeps going, like the edge of the scene.
Right, exactly, right. There's a finite edge. There's a limit to the horizontal positioning of the camera to allow for these more nuanced stage transitions of going up the floor. What else is there? What about the vertical axis?
There's like no more movement on the path.
Right, it's like the RUT project, right? We're not actually following. We're not pegging the Y value of the camera to the Y value of the avatar, of the player character, right? So we have some mobility. In this case, this keeps it nice and framed inside of this world, inside these corridors. So I should notice that these are under, I forgot to say the headline here, these are about following the action. So we'll have different breakdowns of the camera. This is how we follow action. How many of you played this game? I imagine a good number of you have. 2D Minecraft? The official tagline. This is a position locked camera, right? Just like Rally X. Now, does this feel like you're moving a piece of paper under a static character? No. Anyone care to guess why? Yes.
There's like parallax effects in the background with like the sky.
Exactly, right? We have there are multi-layers of things moving in the background, and it also helps that we have a lot higher pixel density, so you're not getting that chunking sensation. Like 1 unit here is worth, I don't know, what, 16 pixels, and 1 unit here is like 1 pixel. So here you're actually getting much artifacts. You can see it, like it's really hard to track with your eye. You see a lot of tearing. You see the screen like teleporting a little bit. That's what happens when you don't have a lot of processing power, a lot of resolution to deal with. But here, this is much smoother. Higher frame rate, that helps. We have more pixel density and the parallax. So the sun, you can easily see that with the sun and the cloud in the background. Those are basically not moving in the sky when the land moves. It's kind of weird. I think they are actually moving. What does that say about the world of Terraria? That the sun is actually way closer to the planet than it should be? Oh my, like, what's going on?
Especially when you consider the name of the final boss.
Yeah, exactly. Glad someone caught the joke. Curbing camera motion. So here we want to avoid unpredictable bumps. So position locking is interesting, right? It gives us a basic camera to work with. But what's the downside of position locking? One we haven't talked about yet. One that you can easily infer based on the title of this. Yes.
The camera will just move around with the speed, which if you're jumping, there's enough.
Right, exactly. There is a lot of motion. Like if you look how many, like at the edge pixels, look how often they change on Jump Bug versus how often they change in Terraria. Right, there's every time you move the player character, every time you give directional input, the background moves on position lock cameras. But now with this camera window, this push box camera, you can have all of this motion inside the middle of the play space without moving the camera. Right, so this kind of helps, particularly older games with lower resolution, lower frame rates. It really helps to avoid this Rally X effect here, where it's popping around. It's it's jerky, just like we had noted. This tiny keyboard has buttons in different places than my normal keyboard at home. So great. What is happening in this camera? Can someone describe the camera algorithm for me? Yes.
Like, it moves in the direct, like, to whatever, wall the car is pushing into, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a collision area that the car has. And when that area goes past that bounding box that you see in the white rectangle, that right box, then it moves the camera to keep the car exactly, the collision surface of the car exactly within that box. Right, pretty straightforward. Easy implementation, but you can see why the effect is here. But let's look at the push box in Rastin Saga. Like righteously cool metal game, right? This game was a hit at the arcades, I'm sure. Okay, describe the camera here. What's going on with this camera? Yes.
It's a push box that isn't centered at the middle of the screen, which is better for this kind of game because it allows you to see more forward, which is where you're going to be headed rather than backward.
Ooh, you may have been one of the first students to actually infer the design intent behind this camera on first go. Well done. Now, that's good, but there's a little more to it. Yeah? Do you have a hand? Okay, I guess not. Now you could do a basic description of it that you could describe just as in Jump Bug, right? Collision surface on player controllable thing. When collision surface touches border of box moves. Or we move the camera accordingly. And we have this area where you can see ahead of you. So the player has more time to react, has more time to move, more time to plan. They get to see more of the geometry, more of the level. Maybe get to observe the behavior of new enemies coming from the direction where they have more time to go. But what about the other side? This is a dual purpose design intent. You want to finish it?
Okay, so they can launch sneak attacks kind of from the back because you're not expecting, or you have a lot less reaction time coming from the left side of the screen.
Exactly. Sneak attacks, back attacks, attacks from above, agency play. Right? So what we're doing is we're giving the character much more agency in going in two directions. Agency being increased by the amount of lead time that you have, by the amount of reaction and preparation time that you have to react to game events. Now, if they come in from the top left, much easier to kill the player. Or you see that the swoop character, the things that come in from the top are hard to deal with. Now, you're all mammals, right? What are you kind of afraid of as a visual-based mammal? Mammal with the sense of visual being important, right? What do you sort of like fear in this like perception space? Yeah, right? Have you ever put a cucumber behind a cat? The cat freaks out, right? Cat barely perceives it, thinks it's a snake, instincts over, and cat flips out. Right? It's very mean. Don't do this to your cats, but you can watch the YouTube videos safely. Right? So this is the same effect we're getting here, right? This also ties into basic human perception and almost instinctual things of, oh, what's at the edge of the eye? What's coming out of the corner? Where it's sort of like not exactly that, because you can see the entire screen. Everything's in your cone of maximum perception. But, things are still coming from behind, from your character, from if you consider yourself to be Rastin, right? Coming from behind, coming from above, coming from where your eyes don't point. Right? So there's a lot of actually design influence here that I think is really neat. Okay, just doing a quick time check. Hey, the clock in here is actually matching my watch. Small miracles. Yes, thank you, UC Davis. All right. What about Fez? Anybody played Fez? I think Fez won the IGF, the GDC's Independent Game Festival, in 2012 when it came out. My game didn't win, but his game won. Fine. So what's going on here? As I ask, when each one of the cameras are succinctly described in the text above and the text to the right. Who could infer what all these terms are meaning here? You want to give it a shot? Yeah, I've been trying to pass the token around, but I'm not going to wait too long. Anyone else who hasn't spoken before want to try? I guess you haven't talked much. Take that.
There's I guess multiple cameras that can provide the illusion of a more 3D space in a 2D scene.
Yeah. I don't know the technical details of Fez. This could be one camera that rotates around, or it could be multiple characters. I think it's one camera because you get several angles of rotation that you see very discreetly. And I doubt they wanted to make all of the art specifically in 2D for every specific angle.
Yeah.
So this is probably a natively 3D game presented in 2D 90-degree angle perspectives. Right. So what's going on here? There's a few more nuances. What do we got?
So when you jump, the camera moves with you, so that the player's always touching the ball.
Roughly, but does it move with you? Look at Fez's feet and look at the white line. Yeah.
It seems to move upward with the player, but with some kind of, I guess, margin of error to smooth it out, where it's it goes up for the half the jump, but at the end, as he's kind of reaching the top of his jump, it's hanging back a little and not moving with the complete as he goes down from the peak of the jump.
Exactly. It's not a one-to-one motion, and we're going to dig more into that in just a bit. So I won't put too fine of a point of it now. But it is not that yellow line, or the yellow line, the white line is not directly mapped to the bottom bounding box of the character. What else we got? Yeah.
I think whenever the camera rotates, it also right here it's gonna rotate. The way that
Yep.
keeps the little character still in the rectangle as it moves to the side, but not exactly where he was originally on the screen. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Let me take a look at this. Yeah. Okay. So he moves. There's a deflection. He's on the right side of the box. He's in the center, and on the right, flips. Is closer to the center. Where here, the character's on the right, and then it goes to the middle. Yeah. So there is some nuance there. I hadn't done the math on this one before, but it looks like when you rotate perspectives, it may not be completely 90-degree perspectives. Or if it was 90 degrees, maybe there's some centering bias with that rotation. We'll see. I want to dig into this a little bit more and maybe find a better answer for that. All right. Excellent. Yes.
It looks like it fits one edge to the edge of the platform, the camera edge.
You're right. It does. Okay, so it's the platforms are the things. The closest platform chunk looks like it may have the camera agency. Perhaps you can't It's been a long time since I played this game. Perhaps you just can't rotate the character wherever and whenever. Perhaps there are little regions that you can rotate the character in, and so we know if the character's in that region, they'll be safely within that camera area. Maybe this is all designed, every rotation is something considered. Every place you can rotate is something considered, perhaps. Let's check it out. What else? Yes?
I couldn't really hear if anyone else said this, but the motion of the camera is smoothed out kind of, so like it lags behind the player.
Yeah, we talked about that with the y-axis, but it's also happening in the x as well, like it's on the 2D plane. Excellent, well done. What else? What are we pushing? Don't say P. No, don't do it. Bad song. What else we got? What are we pushing? Yes.
Could it be that the smoothing, just because there's like a slight delay following the player speed, like the
Yeah, so that's what we're describing. There's a normalizing effect. We're pushing these lines, right? There's a line to the left and a line to the right, and we're pushing those. It's not exactly a push box, it's a push line, and we have sort of like this floaty, snappy bottom surface. Cool? Cool. You can see there was a lot of actually innovation in 2012 in camera mechanics. Like there was this renaissance of 2D indie games, and they sort of pushed this technology quite a bit. All right. Here, we're going to talk about snapping. And this helps us fix camera drifts. Perhaps the camera goes awry. Okay. Who can describe the camera of Shinobi?
So it looks like the top and I assume the bottom also are like the hard lines where the camera will absolutely follow it if it hits that. Like it starts to center on the character, like the middle line. A lot slower.
Exactly. Does anyone want to add to that? So we have the top T and the bottom T, the two horizontal lines at the very top and the very bottom of this inferred camera logic, which are hard push surfaces. We have the middle line. Who else can help to complete this description? Yeah, one then two.
I think the middle line tries to snap to the platform that the player is on,
Which middle line?
of the camera. So
The horizontal or vertical? There are two middle lines.
Sorry. The
Okay,
horizontal.
cool.
Yeah.
Horizontal middle line, yeah.
Yeah, it snaps to the platform that the character is on, and it slowly drifts constantly, whereas I think the previous one, it would be faster if the character was further from the center.
Right. So we're not Y-snapped, right? We're not push box either. But what we have here is the camera not actually adjusting its Y position until what happens? Yeah, until is on floor, right? Just like our character body function that we have, like rigid body 2D and Godot. Did you have something else to add? Okay, excellent. Okay, so we are locked in X position, but we have position snapping. So when you touch the floor, the camera at some set velocity, it looks like a pretty even velocity, a linear velocity, continues towards the character until the bottom of the character's collision surface matches that middle line. Hey, look, there's some logic here like your follower, just in the other direction. All right, so this is interesting. We're position snapping. We have a camera window and we have position locking, all in the same camera. Right? Why, though? Why this camera? What could possibly be the design intent here? Yeah?
When you jump, it reduces the motion of the camera going up and down. Instead, we'll basically just keep the same Y level as long as you're not doing a high jump, and then adjust gradually once you're on the floor. Also, I'm noticing that the Y lock or the X lock is actually slightly to the left. I assume for the same reason as Rise of the Saga.
Yeah, you're right. That is, you are correct. It is not in the middle. It is a little bit to the left of the screen. You have more room to the right to explore. But I want to put a finer point on this. Like, why Why? Yeah.
I've never seen this gameplay of this game before, but it looks like there's a lot of up traveling
Uh-huh.
through platforms. So, like, if you didn't have that kind of snap going up to like when he jumps on the boxes, you could just stay level, and the player wouldn't know like when they could actually jump up to a level above. So you have to have that snap to be able to see, oh, there's a platform above me, and then you can jump onto that platform, and then the camera follows, and again you can see farther up.
Yeah. So there's a gameplay effect to the verticality here, to becoming close to the screen edge. You would add?
Yeah, I was gonna
And then-
add that like because the camera slowly follows you upwards, then the enemies sort of jump out at you. Right? You have less time to react.
Yeah, so reaction time is very short when you are close to the top, right? Would you like to add anything? Yeah, you had your hand up, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess kind of adding on to that in the opposite direction. I noticed that like they made it so you can't jump past it, so you can't like lose yourself on top.
Mm-hmm.
You have still enough time to react to enemies.
Yeah, just like it's a bad practice to have your NPCs not moving and not reacting, it's also bad practice to have the thing you're controlling not be visible on the screen, right? Only in very certain circumstances, like those JRPG puzzles where you become a ghost and you lose your marker, right? Like there's very, very rare occasions where you should make the player not see what they're controlling. This would be not a good use case for that, I guess, unless like you could like Utsusemi or Blink or whatever, your Shinobi. That'd be kind of fun. But that's not this game. So what we have here is risk. We are changing the risk profile. It's different risk going from left to right than it is traversing the level and going up. There's a lot of ambushing that can happen. You have to react very quickly and grok what's happening, understand the geometry, the enemies, the types, the projectiles, the obstacles very quickly while you're going upwards. In a game where you can get hurt quite easily. Yes?
There's all this work from the camera control and player can see, like, how does that drive the games like adjustable field of view?
That just what field of view?
Adjustable field of view.
I mean, that's a different feel, right? So design intent. If you have an adjustable camera, a player can see more. They have more perception, more omniscience, so it's a balancing act. You have less time to attack them. Like when I play MMOs, when I'm playing to a high level, what do? I pull the camera out to the maximum extent possible and put it directly overhead so I can see what fire I'm standing in. Right? You can't do that here. Diablo 4. They made the camera box and what you can see super tight, and everyone complains about it. So that just means you can't see what's coming, right? This is definitely something you can play with. If game designers have decided to give you a camera that you can adjust, then they've decided to let you adjust that difficulty, right? So what is the design intent? So I want you to be very deliberate when you make the cameras for your games. Why? Why can you see how much of the world that you can see? All right. We played this one. What's going on here? So the camera is different on horizontal levels than vertical levels, and this is the vertical level version. Yes.
So this is kind of similar to Shinobi, except there's no upper or bottom line, and I assume there's no upper line because Mario just can't jump that high, so he won't ever go out of the bounds of the camera.
Mario can fly though.
Oh.
There is actually an upper limit. You won't go off the screen. Yeah, they just don't have it visualized. Yeah.
Okay, and similar to before, when Mario lands on a platform, the camera goes up to the top of that platform.
Exactly right. So is on floor means camera sync at a rate. It's a pretty fast rate too, much faster than Shinobi was. I'm not sure it's linear. Yes.
At least in this case, the horizontal camera is just locked.
Yeah, you can't change the X position of the camera at all. Right? And so I know we have people that we've had people in this class before that are task experts in running these games, and of course, people that like do like world record speed runs with tasks on these games know more about how the cameras work than I do. So if you're that person and you have details, please share. PSA over. So this is a way, a very nuanced way, in a game that has excellent camera control to handle these vertical only levels. Platform snapping. All right. What about Rayman? Yeah.
It's kind of the same where it only moves after the player is on the platform.
Yeah.
Yeah, it snaps to his feet.
Exactly. Why would I show both of these? 1, then 2. 1, then 2. Which one looks better to your eyes? Optometry jokes. Yeah.
One's a vertical oriented game and one's horizontal.
Yeah. So this is the same algorithm, but it works going left to right. Exactly. There's also another minute difference. Yes.
So it snaps smoother to his feet rather than on in Mario World, like it like jumps to his position, but it more directly like smoothly pans to his feet.
Exactly, right? So the velocity of camera catch-up when is on floor is detected is much faster in Super Mario Brothers than it is in Rayman. Now, if you look, there are cases in Rayman where the character lands and jumps before the camera catches up with the feet, right? And so the player can be momentarily desync if jumping quickly enough. I would hope this is designful on a particular set of levels when you have to do a bunch of jumping. If you do it fast, you all of a sudden increase the challenge by having less lead time to see above you. I don't know. This one could be marginal. This could just be like an undesigned edge case. I wouldn't call it a bug, but it could be designful. If any of you know the developers, the lead game designer of Rayman in 1995 at Ubisoft, please have them contact the class. Well, we'll give them they can speak. We'll give them a lecture slot. All right. Awesome knots. Yeah, we have awesome knot players? Yeah, okay, all right. What's going on with the camera then? Since you know this camera intimately. You spend time with it.
Yeah, I guess it's like the same as the other games where it's like horizontally locked and then it adjusts as you go up and down. I think in this game it's really important because it's like it is like a live MOBA, so you're like need to be aware all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So they're doing the same risk profile play that you saw in Shinobi, right? But there's a few game mechanics in this game, and you mentioned one of them, it being a live MOBA, that makes this interesting. What's the other basic player mechanic here that is making that top line in the lead ahead time when going up important design choice for this camera? Yeah. You can fly. You have a hover capability, right? A limited hover capability, right? And the more you use that capability to go up and across the screen, the less lead time you have, and the more like someone sitting at the top level can just wait for people to fly up and get an ambush, right? I imagine that was fairly common in the game. More design choices. All right, so that was snapping. That was making sure that in certain circumstances, mostly is on floor, the character was then recentered to the screen to be the center of the action. Yes?
Would you say that, I've never played this game, but would you say that like the reason to have that window at the top be kind of the push to move the camera, sort of act as a trade-off to like for players using fly, they have to be maybe a little bit more careful of when and how they fly because they don't know for sure what could be up top.
Yeah, I would almost certainly say that's true. Yeah.
Oh yeah, actually I hadn't thought about this, but yeah, like in the game, the verticality is actually super important. Like all the maps are designed with different like levels, and changing between levels is often like how you start and like win engagements. So like going upwards is generally kind of bad because you're going in more blind, whereas coming down normally is better. And like you can even see like in this GIF, so that like button part in the middle, when you land on that button, it like opens an instant death trap. So like
Oh,
being
okay.
on the bottom, you don't know who's above you, and like they can drop faster than you can go up.
Fascinating. Okay, well that's a nuance I didn't know about this. We'll have to keep that in the discussion for the future. That's pretty neat. And you can also see there's a lot of bottlenecks here. It looks like upwards traversal happens in like more select locations instead of everywhere. So natural ambush points, natural funnel points where people are weak and not paying attention. Flying is imba, right? Flying is usually imbalanced in games like this where you can just move around anywhere you want. This helps balance it out a bit, particularly when going up. All right, camera smoothing. So this is where we want to look at 80s pixels versus indie pixels. I'm sure all of you have played pixel-based games. It looks like almost all of you played Terraria. Right? So now what we're in this world where things look like they're pixelated. This stylized pixel graphic is very popular. It's still ongoing. Oh geez, what was the procedural content generation Space Odyssey game where you what? No, not No Man's Sky. It's a 2D game. It's actually like kind of a narrative adventure game with some combat. Now I'm forgetting what it's called. Anyway, where your characters are very pixelated. You can't tell really any facial detail on them, but they're taking up a good chunk of the screen. Way more than like the 4 pixels that their head looks like. That's way more than 4 actual pixels on your like 4K monitor, right? So here, each individual pixel in your indie game is like 32 pixels, or even more, in your actual screen pixel space. That means you can have a lot more nuanced movement, right? If you have an 80s pixel at 256 by 240 resolution versus 1080p, what are the consequences of that? In basic movement. So if each pixel is like an inch, and then we have like 1/8 of an inch pixels to the right, 1/8 of an inch pixels here, inch long pixels here. What's going on? Yeah?
You don't have to move the full pixel.
You don't have to move the full pixel. All of a sudden you can have 1/8 of a pixel nuance movement, which is really handy for animations, for characterizations, for nudging things along and making things look like they have more travel time and velocity. When you're at 80s pixel location, you move in a big chunk at a time. So nuanced movement and things like showing momentum and movement feel are difficult. Like you couldn't even have something like skid to a halt sensibly in 80s pixels, right? Because skid to a halt, like, right? Instead of like indie pixels, which you can do a smooth slow. Right? So we have a lot, you have to understand that smoothing in old games was very important, but not nearly as good or achievable as their more modern counterparts. Pac-Land. Okay, what's going on smoothing here? Position locked, right? This means that there wasn't a lot of smoothing going on. Hey, have any of you heard of this designer before? Okay. Who is Shigeru Miyamoto? Anyone got my back? Okay, sure, we won't explain. Some people don't need to be explained. So, did a lot of really interesting work in camera work. Excitebike, 1994. This is a cool like racing game that you could like edit levels on. This was a pretty rad little game. But there wasn't a lot of nuanced camera work in that, or Devil World, right? But Excitebike had scrolling, and the scrolling was mapped to the speed of the bike, right? It was pretty rudimentary. Now you lead into games like this, like legendary games like Excitebike and Devil World, games that that are just in the canon that you can't go on without, right? Everyone's played these games. And then there's a little known like indie title, right, that Shigeru also made that maybe made the camera a little better. Super Mario Brothers, you may have heard of it. 1995, Nintendo, on the Famicom and the Nintendo Entertainment System. What's going on with this camera? I'll give you a moment to take a look. I'm just going to give people a moment, but I'll call on you first. Oh, sorry, I saw your hand, but we have a queue. Hang on, yep. We have a queue of responses. You are first, you are second. Yeah, please go ahead.
What's it called? Like as far as like the white line in the middle is like where the camera is generally locked when Mario's running to the right. But then if he goes back, it then starts going to like the lighter white line. It starts to ease the camera forward and then fully start moving forward as Mario moves forward into it.
Yeah, right. So we have a hard right line, a softer left line, and there's some speed play in the middle, right? Is there a final point? All right, okay. Anyone else want to add to this? Put some more details on here? Like, we have the speed play in the middle. How do we characterize that? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if there's any backwards movement.
No backwards. Zero backwards.
Yeah, it's designed to push you forward.
Mario only advances. Mario does not go backwards. What else? Yeah.
The gap between the solid white and the darker white and the lighter white. This is more of a question, but does it calculate how fast Mario's moving between that gap?
Yeah, it's part of the calculation.
Okay. So it moves the camera to adjust for how fast he's moving, so like predicts a little bit.
It's not actually predictive.
No.
It's just simply response of current speed.
Oh.
It's like 80% at current speed. And Mario's speed is not static. Or Mario has, in this case, which is very important, and we'll talk about motion later for game feel, Mario does not instantaneously accelerate. Mario has a bit of weight to him. Mario speeds up and gets to maximum velocity. And so there's a line here. There's a push line on the right, and then there's a zone in the middle, a speed up zone. So we call this a speed up push zone style camera. So one side window camera, goes forward statically only, never goes backwards. Now when Mario, you see, hits that light, when Mario's to the left of the thinner line, the camera doesn't move at all. When Mario moves to the left, the camera doesn't move at all. But when Mario moves to the right, between the thin line and the thick line, the camera moves slightly slower than Mario's movement speed. Roughly like 70 or 80% of Mario's movement speed, so Mario can get ahead of the camera. But then when Mario hits the right side, it's a push line. And I put it to you, but why? I know you've heard this one before. Yeah.
It'll help make the graphics just look smoother as he transitions into a new area of the map, because the right movement is always going to be going, like increasing the camera view. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
having that gradual effect will make it less jarring.
Exactly. We have a smoothness argument, which is certainly true. Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's like such a platforming focused game, it can be really hard. Like, cause they designed the game to be for like babies kind of. Like this whole
Jeez,
time-
I have failed so many times with this game. I am baby. Yes?
It's pretty hard actually, but like it's harder to move to a platform when the camera's also moving. So like being able to do jumps and the camera moves like predictably, or like in the GIF, like you can see that they're like jumping on a static platform, and they can go backwards without it like all moving around under them.
Yeah. And this is 1985, right? People need all the help they can get. People are still playing like controller-based games by doing this, right? When pressing the buttons, making the controller move. Yeah. What else is going on here? What feel are we promoting with this speed up zone? Why is this camera legendary? We haven't quite nailed it yet. Why is this camera controller a huge advancement in the state of the art?
Is it more immersive in a way?
It is. almost for like 90% the way there. Yeah?
Does it imitate the way human eye tracks
I'm sorry? Human eye tracking?
it? Does it imitate the way human eye tracks it?
I haven't put that angle together. Perhaps. I don't know. That's not something I know about, but I could see a case for it for sure.
Does it like make the jump more intense because like the camera suddenly speeds up?
It does make the jump more intense. Yes. That we're like 95% the way there now. Yeah.
Is it blurred?
No blur. That's just an artifact of it being a GIF. Yeah. That's just compression. Another hand over here. Yeah.
It gives his movement like more weight to it.
Ding, ding, ding. The acceleration forward now has heft to it. Not just heft in Mario's personal acceleration ramping up to his maximum velocity, but the camera also contributes to that feeling of acceleration, motion, and power. This speed up zone made this Super Mario Brothers game feel so much better than all the other games on the platform. At a time in a world where things looked like this and this, right? Oh no. And Rally X. We won't go all the way up. We almost did, but we won't. We have this. We have this elegant, smooth, motion accelerated camera with a push zone that matched a character that had momentum and had fantastic player control. Miyamoto nailed this, right? This was like a quantum leap forward in camera controller technology and jump technology. The camera controller and the jump are both things of mythic qualities. Who knows this game? Metroid, 1986. Games didn't take like a million years to develop back in the 80s. So what did they do with this one? They stole a bit of tech, right? They had these push zones, these push lines with a bit of zone in the middle. It's not a speed zone, but it is a zone that modulates movement. So for this one, we have this space in the middle where the camera doesn't move, and we have push left and push right, or push up and push down, depending on which way the level is oriented. This keeps the action centered in a particular area, a more meaningful area, which helps the player out. But it also stops a bunch of like herky-jerky motion in this game where you're like struggling to press down twice to turn into a morph ball and plant a bomb in a pixel-perfect location, so you can jump and get that power up out of sequence. So also with that same perception knowledge of this camera not moving, it's easier to do movement tasks when the camera's not moving around. It's easier for us to perceive and be precise. And this game had a lot of precision qualities to it. So we have this area. If you were in the middle, you had a lot of like precision, and you had a lot of control, and things were where you could see them. Right? So there's a lot of design in the Metroid camera as well. Donkey Kong Country, fabulous soundtrack. This had position snapping with lerp smoothing. We haven't talked about lerp yet. Does anyone know what lerping is? Yeah.
Not sure exactly what it like it's kind of I guess it's a linear
Linear interpolation, yes.
It's the idea of where the camera isn't exactly following the character, but like kind of lags behind.
Exactly. Yeah. Did you want to add?
Yeah, I think the basic idea of like the effect is that the farther the character is away from whatever position we want to lock the camera to is, the faster the camera will move. But then as it gets closer, the camera sort of smoothly slows down.
That would be nonlinear interpolation.
Oh, really?
Okay, but to be fair, that is a very good statement, and I bring up the nonlinear part because game people call lerp on basically anything that tweens, including nonlinear interpolation with ease in and ease out. They call lerping. This function here, lerp at the bottom, is linear. There is no logic here or any math part of this equation that makes the first part of the time, the first chunk of the interpolation, faster, or ease in or ease out, or the back end ease in or ease out. This is simply a subtraction and multiplication, right? But your comment is well taken. So this is a common technique in games. We use interpolation all the time. How do you get something from point A to point B over time when you want to be very precise about what point A and point B are? It's more than just adding a velocity to something. Here, you can use a linear interpolation function. You could give it a vec2a and a vec2b and a time value between 0 and 1, and map it between the a.x, a.y, and b.x and b.y over that time period in a linear way. This is a tool that game programmers use a lot. Like this game uses it a lot. How many of you played Ed McMillan's classic? Made it at Santa Cruz, I think. Yeah. Played it. Super Meat Boy. Fabulously difficult, fun platformer where you get to see yourself die a whole bunch of times. Now what happens here is we have linear interpolation smoothing with position locking. So here, this will be part of the assignment too, creating this camera. When you jump and move away from the center of the camera non-linearly sort of like catches up with you. It lags, right? And I think produces a pretty fabulous effect. I think it works out really well. It makes the game world look dynamic. It makes your animations look impactful, or your decisions as a player to move and move quickly be impactful. And it gives this illusion that you are moving very fast because even the basic camera just trying to catch up with you, right? There's a lot going on here design-wise. And then there's physics-based smoothing. If you played Never Alone, it's a very cute game where there's physics smoothing that follows the trajectory that the fox jumps. See, the fox will go up here, it'll jump to the left and make an arc, and the camera will arc to catch up with it. If it was just doing simple linear interpolation of position A and position B, it would not do that up arc. It would go straight to the wolf, to the fox. Physics smoothing, also in Hyper Light Drifter. Also a game with a fabulous camera and soundtrack. Things go together, I guess. And these should be some of the last ones we talk about. This is framing. How many of you have played a auto-scrolling shmup? Shoot 'em up, right? Maybe bullet hell games. Yeah. Okay. So what's going on here? What's this camera doing? I guess we're gonna have to save Inscription for next class. Begin next week with the game instead of ending the week with the game. That's okay, right? We'll have our dessert first. What's going on with this camera? Yes. 1, 2, and some. It's all. Okay. Yep. The camera's moving on its own. Excellent. That's one thing going on. That's the most important thing, in fact. Yeah. Someone had their hand up over here. Next. I forget exactly what it was. All right. Would you like to go?
So cameras like moving at constant speed. Typically, there's like a bounding box on the left, so the player has to stay like within the camera.
Exactly. In this case, there's an implicit bounding box, which are the borders of the screen that you can't move past, and the screen geometry is auto-scrolling. So it's like being in a bounding box where the bounding box is moving on its own volition, right? It can drag you along if you do not move along with it. But the neutral in a lot of these games, when you're not touching directionality, is to move forward with the same velocity that the bounding box is moving forward in, that the camera is moving forward with. Great. Some classic stuff. We don't want to talk about this. This is an interesting one from Defender, 1981. This is a game where you can move across the landscape of space, interstellar space warfare, in 2 directions. Maybe interplanetary. I'm not sure what world we're in, what the tech level is for these folks. But you could go from left to right by pressing the joystick, and then you would do this catch-up mechanism where the camera would go slower than you in the direction that you are now facing. So then you would go to the back edge, and the design intent here is that the direction you were facing would give you get more lead time in that direction, right? But there's also a risk in switching because that profile of risk changes as you switch. And it's not static. It shifts from one direction to another, but over a period of time. All right, I think we don't. So dual focus forward, there are, games like Bonanza, where you have couch co-op multiplayer games on the same screen. This one's really interesting. What's going on here? There's a reason like we only talked about the vertical version of this and not the horizontal version, because there's a lot of stuff going on here, right? Can someone help interpret this? 1, 2. Yeah.
Once you reach a line on either the dashed line on either the left or the right, the camera snaps, or I guess the camera snaps to like slightly forward focused, like on the opposite side.
Yeah, exactly. Did you want to add?
Pretty much same thing. Like the outer lines, when you like say the left one, and then the camera then snaps to the inner right one, the opposite one in the middle.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit more lead time.
Exactly. Yeah. So you started mentioning the design intent. What else? Like, can we round out that design intent conversation here? Why do something that's complicated? Other than you had to up yourself from your NES camera to make it more snazzy for the SNES. Yeah.
Super Mario World has Mario move in both directions instead of just one. Also, because Mario has a projectile, it would really be helpful to see forward.
Yeah, this is actually a very kind camera to the player, right? It's the Super Mario Bros. Camera working in 2 dimensions, but once you get too far off, it actually bounces you back, so you get more room ahead of you than you got behind you. And whenever you switch direction, you have that again, right? So the risk profile is very much mediated, while not being like a static position lock camera. So this one works quite well. I think it's a very interesting camera. Okay, are there any more of these we want to talk about? Position locking, forward clustering. This one is LERP smoothing, but unlike Super Meat Boy, it's a following camera. So this camera, when you are facing a direction or moving in a direction, the camera goes ahead of you in the direction of movement and then sinks back to you once you stop moving forward, right? Why? Let's apply our design logic, our design intent thinking here to this camera. Yes? To give you a preview of what's ahead. In a world where, go ahead. Exactly. Yeah, it's a world where you can move in any vector of movement on that 2-dimensional plane, right? And so it's giving you any direction look ahead based by what you input as the player. Good job. Yeah.
It seems to pan ahead further based on how fast you're going, so it's giving you response time.
Yeah. So this one may have, so it's velocity based. So the more you move around, the faster you move around, the more look ahead you have in that particular direction. So it seems to scale with speed and direction. The magnitude of movement, magnitude of the vector of movement, not just normalizing it. Okay. I don't think we need to talk much more about the rest of these. This one's interesting because this is target focused, like it'll snap to particular targets that you're looking at. There's some that move in different directions. Instead of just going horizontal or vertical, you can move in diagonals. Once you get into 3D cameras, you end up having things like camera paths that help simplify the problem. I encourage you to go through the rest of this. We don't really have time to go through all of these, but I think it's a really interesting one to look at and go through. Like Insanely Twisted had a really fun camera. And then you can look at attractors. Like there's all sorts of very interesting stuff that's a little beyond the scope of what we'll talk about in this class. But for your own games, you may want to be cognizant. Like as does like gesture based. The camera's responsive to the gestures. It's really fun. Okay. So we have 4 minutes left. Obviously, we don't have time to play Inscription. We may hold that forward for next class. Maybe we get a volunteer to come and play it. We'll see. I offered it to the TAs first, but didn't quite get a response yet. Oh, you, we've got people that want to play it. All right. So we'll make that happen, and then we'll talk about what game systems it has, and what bundles of implementations and genres we can rely on to implement those systems. All right, good luck on your exercise 1. Don't worry about attendance. Like I said, we're not going to take it, just to reiterate, and I'll put that out in an announcement. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask on Discord first. And then, if it's like you're going to give the answer away, please send an email to me and the TAs, and we'll usually anonymize the question, make it safe, and then put it on Discord so everyone can see the answer. All right. Take care.